in the history of Buddhism and the various teachers that have come, sometimes, many times, it's happened that someone had a great level of knowledge and a very high level of practice, but found himself at a moment, found himself at a point a little bit blocked, but it stopped. There's the story of Naropa. There's the story of Atisha, also Lama Tzong Khapa, and I think these are already three names that are important enough. If we look at Naropa, for example, Naropa he was a practitioner who had already a great level, a highly developed level of understanding for Buddhist philosophy. He was an excellent meditator. He was an important master at the monastery of Nalanda. And if we were to talk about, I dare use the term the monastic career, I'd say that he had already reached the top. But he was at a moment where he felt that he had the knowledge, but he was missing realizations. He wasn't able to transform completely what was the conceptual knowledge in a deep, direct experience. Atisha, one of the most important teachers in Buddhism, at a certain moment, even he was a master with all of the qualities and knowledge, but at a certain point he saw that he wanted to develop the bodhicitta in particular, and the knowledge that he had, which just wasn't enough. He was a little blocked at that moment. Lama Tzong Khapa, who had an extraordinarily high level of knowledge. He started teaching when he was only 3 years old. At 12 years old, he was already doing the self-initiation of Heruka, and all of Lama Tzong Khapa's teachers then became his own disciples. Our Mitsema prayer that we recite, etc. This is the prayer. This is a request of. It was a request of prayer to Lama Tzong Khapa. It was actually written by Lama Tzong Khapa as an offering to his teacher, or to Rendawa. Rendawa, and when he offered it to Rendawa, Rendawa said, I am not worthy of this prayer, and he offered it back to him. And even Lama Tzong Khapa, who had already had direct had direct contact, visions of Manjushri, the Buddha of wisdom, but he still felt somehow blocked. In particular, with a correct view of reality, and he said that he wanted to go to wanted to go to India and look for other masters, and instead his vision said, no, you need to purify and generate merit, do a retreat. So we have 3 stories to find. So with these 3 stories tell us that to have realizations, you need to find the correct master, and in this case, Lama Tzong Khapa, if in Naropa, for example, he did a retreat as well, and he had this vision where he had this vision that told him he needed to find his master, Tilopa. He had a kind of vision. Says, you need to find the master Tilopa. And he leaves. He he just leaves in India looking for a master named Tilopa who wasn't anyone well known, So he just leaves everything he has and he goes looking and he goes from south to north, just walking and looking for this master. And now I don't want to go on into too many details on all three of these stories. He finds Tilopa in a very non-conventional way. Tilopa was a non-conventional conventional teacher. He was highly realized. At a certain point, Naropa was along a riverbank. We have the representation of Naropa there and Tilopa. Anyway, Tilopa was along a riverbank, and so Naropa sees this man who looked like a sadhu. He had dreadlocks pulled up, and he also had like he had ashes on his skin, and he was fishing, and he would catch a fish, and he would open up the fish, eat up all the guts of the fish, and throw away the fish into the water. And Naropa thought, what a poor guy, what all this bad karma he's accumulating. And as soon as he thinks that, this man, he gets up and he turns towards him, and he says, how unfortunate that this poor man that is creating so much negativity is the one you're searching for. And then he said, "Are you Tilopa? You're Tilopa?" And then he never says yes. And Naropa starts following him, and every once in a while Tilopa would say, "If I had a disciple, he should do this," and then Naropa would do it, and they were absolutely impossible, absurd things. Just to close this parenthesis here, in this case, Tilopa, what he was doing the transference of consciousness for the fish. He was helping the fish be reborn in a better state. In any case, Naropa was able to have realizations by finding a master who created the correct interdependence with him. Because what we read today, it's not that Tilopa needed to teach him something conceptual, all the theory, all the concepts he already knew. But he was a realized being who created a condition to help him purify and accumulate merits. And through that, Naropa was able to reach and to have realizations. From the outside, it seemed like the craziest things were happening, but inside, when those things were happening, every time Naropa had an insight. He had a realization of something that had been before only conceptual. If we look the story of Atisha, Atisha left the monastery of Vikramasila. He was already an important master, and it's said that he traveled with there were 300 disciples that wanted to travel with him, and at that point, many of them went with him, as many as could fit in the ship, and they went to Indonesia, where they were looking for the master Suvanadipa, Serlingpa. And even here, he goes to look for a teacher. He's spending 13 months on a ship and through storms, to go to an unknown land and an unknown context, so that he could meet a master who had realizations of bodhicitta. So he finds this master, Serlana Selingpa, and he spends 12 years there. Lama Tzong Khapa, this is something interesting. It's just something about Atisha and Lama Selingpa. Lama Selingpa was Atisha's most important master, and through him, Atisha was able to realize bodhicitta, this great love towards other beings. But from the point of view of the correct view of reality, Atisha had a deeper view. It's said that Lama Tsarningpa had the view of a correct reality through the school of Chittamatra, which is the mind-only school, and instead Atisha followed the Madhyamika Prasangika school. This is just to say that when we look for a master, in this case, it's not that the master needs to be superior in all aspects, but can have aspects, specific aspects that then can guide the disciple. In this case of Lama Selingpa, it was the pure and complete realization of bodhicitta, which allowed him to be the guide of Atisha. Anyway, Lama Tzong Khapa, instead, at a certain point in his life, it seems that at some point he was blocked, and he wanted to go to India to find other teachers. And Manjushri told him no. He told him he needed to do a retreat of accumulation of merits and purification. And in Oka Chuling, which is at the border between India and Tibet, he spent a year and a half doing a retreat on making mandala offerings and prostrations. When you make a mandala offerings, the base of his mandala, he was using a stone, and you use the base of your wrist, and this stone, it said, was absolutely smoothed out and consumed. The same for the stone on the ground where he was doing prostrations. So he went with a few disciples. And he was there for a year and a half, and then at the end of that year and a half, it's not that his practice was only to study. His practice was about accumulating merits and purifying. This was his practice. And after this period of 1 year and a half, he had a dream. At the very, very early in the morning, where he was together with the most important teachers that he had never met but had studied. There was Nagarjuna, Chandrakirti, Asanga, Vasubandhu, Buddha Palita, the most important ones, and they were discussing the correct view of reality among themselves. And then before waking up, one, Buddha Palita, takes his text and he gives it to Lama Tzong Khapa. And when he woke up from that dream, he takes that text, and by reading that text, he was able to have an insight, and he was able to realize and understand what he before was not able to understand, and he was able to obtain realizations. What I mean to say is that the path for each one of us is not a path that's necessarily easy, but mostly it's not linear, where everything happens as we expect. It's normal that along this path of our lives, that there are moments that are easier and others that are more difficult moments. Maybe we get to a certain level of knowledge, and that we're not able to transform that knowledge into experience, into realizations, moments where we feel blocked, where we don't really know what to do, where to go. This is part of life. It's part of the path. So it's not it's not that in the past this never happened and that we're doing something wrong, but today we need to learn from the examples of the past, the life of the past teachers. We should need to learn from them. And when I find myself, I can say when I find myself in a certain situation, and one of the important things is that when we look at the lives of many practitioners, one of the important things has always been the accumulation of merits and purification. Unfortunately, in our modern times, in the context in which we live, it's a little bit difficult for us to understand and integrate it into our lives. It's not something that comes spontaneously. Let's say every once in a while we see that we think that purification is connected to this an idea of sacrifice or and has nothing to do with that. And even the accumulation of merit, maybe we have this idea of making a sacrifice, but it has nothing to do with that. There are three fundamental points to be able to transform knowledge into experience. Obviously, one needs to study, needs to understand and reflect on the teachings that are given. This is without a doubt. But beyond that, one needs to meditate. And to be able to sustain this path, it's important to accumulate merits, purify one's own negativities, this inertia, this karmic inertia, this karmic forces, negative karmic forces that have been generated in the past, and request blessings. These are three things that are fundamental. There's so many examples. For example, there was one practitioner at the monastery of Sera who had all the knowledge, etc., but he saw that he was never able to go ahead with his practice, and at a certain point, he was advised to make offerings, and he started making many, many offerings. I mean, even exaggerating, you know. So even his house was just it was so filled with incense that it would burn the eyes. He just offered as much as he could. But after that process, at a certain point, something changed inside of him, and he was able to transform what was before only conceptual into to practice. And in the great monasteries of, where there are communities that are organized, Sera, Ganden, etc. I'm talking about the Gelupa tradition, but it's the same for others. The path of spiritual growth is made up of study and debate and meditation, but there's also karma yoga and practices to accumulate merit and purify negative karma. It's fundamental. It's a little bit because starting from the philosophical basis, it's impossible to experience a result without having created the causes. This is one of the pillars of this is a basis of. So we need to create the causes to be able to experience these states of consciousness. So that's why it's important to talk about accumulating positive energy, accumulate merits. So when someone, or better, when we find ourselves at the beginning of our path, it's one of the easiest moments. I mean, on one hand, it's difficult because it seems like we're at the beginning. We don't we don't know where to start from or what to do, but it, but that there's that moment of falling in love with the Dharma, which is wonderful, where we see great changes, great things. So, when we're at the beginning, there are times when we are, in which we see great benefit in the practice. We see quick results too. But what happens is the path. It's said that the further I go, the more I grow along the path, the more that my mental defilements, the qualities I need to develop, all becomes more subtle, and and the mental defilements become more subtle, and then the antidote to them needs to be stronger. When we need to face our mental defilements on a more coarse level, then the antidotes can be weaker, and then instead, when they are more subtle, we need stronger antidote. One thing, like to use a metaphor, it's the gross level of dirt, for example, is easy to clean, but a stain instead takes it takes longer to clean, and the deeper that stain in, the longer it takes to clean it, and the stronger products we need. And along our path, the same thing happens. So one important aspect is to not be in a hurry, to just make sure that we're always walking. There are times where one gets to if one has doubts and asks himself, "Am I doing the right thing?" Maybe one feels a little bit blocked, and in those moments, what one should do is to focus our energy in the accumulation of merits, in the practices of purification, the request of blessings, and continue walking and giving time to our own processes, because things aren't immediate. I mean, changing deep mental conditionings, it takes time. I mean, think of a sangha who spent 12 years to meditating to realize bodhicitta. Sometimes we have this expectation that now, because I've understood, I can easily realize. Instead, the parkour, the path is longer. I mean, understanding is essential, but after that, one needs to familiarize himself. And what gives support to really familiarize and realize is to have these so-called merits, creating the causes to then be able to have these realizations. And here comes is the importance of practicing generosity, the first of the six perfections. And an offering is not an exchange. An offerings are acts of offering. I give because, I mean, generosity, this act of giving, and it is divided into two types. When I give something to someone who is spiritually is the same or inferior to me, that's called an act of generosity. Instead, if I give something to someone who is more spiritually elevated, it's called an offering. it's still it's always an act of sharing and giving, but it's said that this is one of the best ways to generate positive karma, to these so-called merits. And so when Buddha described the six perfections, that generosity is the first, Nagarjuna says the reason that it's the first is because to be able to realize the others, one needs merits, and one of the best ways to accumulate merits is through the act of generosity. And so by sharing, giving, offering, doning, this is something very important along our path. And then there's the practice of, of morality, patience, enthusiastic effort, concentration and wisdom. If we look in the Bodhisattva Charavattara, it said all of these branches, Buddha taught them in function of wisdom. The objective is to realize a correct view of reality, wisdom. But to get there, one needs to have realized, one needs to have perfected and put into practice generosity, morality, patience, enthusiastic effort, and concentration. Without those, it would be hard, from what it said, impossible to realize wisdom without having that basis. I understand that everyone's so, we want to take a shortcut and go directly there, but the path, all of these other aspects are essential to the path. So I invite you all to, in our daily lives, try somewhere to include this process of accumulation of merits and purification. So with awareness, practice generosity. One thing is being generous. Another thing is practicing generosity. I don't know if that difference is clear. I can be generous because spontaneously I'm generous, and that's wonderful and it's important. Another thing is putting effort into sharing what I have and familiarizing myself even more with generosity. So, familiarizing myself means putting effort into something that doesn't come spontaneously, until I can actually perfect generosity. I mean, they're both important. One should be generous, this is important, but we should also perfect our generosity by putting more effort into it. We share our knowledge, we share our time, we share our body by physically helping, we share our material resources, whatever it is. We should give love, we give protection, dharma. This is one of the most important parts of our path. So very often we're reminded that the path is made of two parts. We need two wings to be able to fly. Method and so wisdom and method. So and a method is all of the has also to do with all the parts of practicing generosity and all of the other perfections. What I've done when I felt myself to be a little bit blocked is I try to I ask myself, where can I put my energy to get this where it can flow well, so that so it can be a support to the rest. If I'm studying something and I see that I don't go forward, then um, then I then I do something to give support to that. So we need to what's important is that we need to keep walking forwards and let our energy flow going forward and not stay, how can I say, blocked. along our path. And one thing that I would just repeat, something that's very important. I don't want to get into too many details. We'll have other other chances too. I've already spoken about it a lot, but we should concentrate on accumulating merit and purifying our negativities and making requests. This is what the retreat that Lama Tzong Khapa did for a year and a half. And when we see what he did in the period, it was the purification practices through prostrations and accumulation of merits through mandala offerings, etc. And Guru Yoga as the requests of blessings. This is mostly what he did on that retreat. How can I say? Each one of us, we dedicate our time, our time, our space, according to our own, the size of our own legs, we're walking, but we need to include these three aspects: accumulating merit, purification, and requests of blessings. Because when we see life, the lives of those who practiced before us, what they made us understand that to be able to transform knowledge into realization, these three things are fundamental. I've never seen the story of anyone who has been able to reach deep states of love or wisdom without having these aspects as a basis. For example, when one develops a high level of knowledge but doesn't have the merits for realizations, is one that one stays in that conceptual level, and then one can develop even a kind of duality, like I I I I I think one thing, but I do another, and then the practice actually becomes something far away. One more time, when we have the merits, and purification, that is a support to transform knowledge into realizations and experience. We have a lot of time in front of us to see how we can accumulate merits and purify. And just in 3 words, to accumulate merit, the things to do are with awareness, be of help to someone to diminish his suffering, or help someone experience a state of well-being, do something that is helpful to that person, to that being, or you do something that helps ourselves, to change our own mental conditionings and develop qualities, and this act of generosity is among the best ways. Now let's do our dedications, and I invite you all to, as much as you're able and to your own level, to try to integrate these 3 ideas, these 3 aspects that are really quite important.
Chetsun alame kutse rapten chi nam kara tinle chokchur gepa dang losan tempe drume sasum ki drowe munsel taktu ne gyur chi kewa kuntu yanda lama dang dralme chiki pela longchu ching sadan lamgi yente rabzo ne Dorje change kopa nyur tobe shua nimo dele tsendele nime kuyan delek shing nintsen takto delek pe kuncho sumke jingi lob kuncho sumke ngodrubo tsol concio sumche trasciscio. All'alba o al tramonto, di notte o durante il giorno, possano i tre gioielli concederci le loro benedizioni, possano aiutarci ad ottenere tutte le realizzazioni e cospargere il sentiero della nostra vita con molti segni di buon auspicio. Buona giornata a tutti.